Move on now to Bruce Fein, who's an American lawyer who specializes in constitutional and international law. The U.S. Congress already recognizes the events of 1915 as a genocide. What difference does it make for President Biden to do so as well? Are there any legal ramifications because of it?
No, it has no legal significance. It's a political statement. And in some sense, it's a confession by Mr. Biden, by the Congress, by the Armenians. They have no legal case to make. The Genocide Convention, which entered into force in 1951, 70 years ago, in Article 9 stipulates that any dispute arising under the convention as to whether there was a genocide or not shall be taken to the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Now, there has been 70 years of opportunity for Armenia to take their allegations to the International Court of Justice for an adjudication by an organization that's not politicized. They don't get political donations or things like that. 70 years of silence on the Armenian side. Because they don't have a legal case, they have resorted to political donations and political power to get political statements. I have no doubt that Mr. Biden has not really undertaken any serious investigation. One, of what the Genocide Convention means. What are the elements of genocide? What transpired in 1915? Has he read the European Court of Human Rights decision in the Paranet case in 2015 stating there's never been an adjudication of an Armenian genocide? Stating that historical events like these in 1915 don't lend themselves to affirmative conclusions one way or the other? I believe it would have been far more sensible for Mr. Biden to have urged Armenia, use your right under Article 9. The International Court of Justice has been waiting for 70 years. He could even state that he would try to submit what's called a friend of the court brief if he thinks that there was a genocide. But we know politicians are motivated with political motives. They are not motivated to find out historical facts. And this is unfortunately a continuing politicization of the issue that will drive this matter further away from a resolution, because it doesn't insist. If Armenia insists making the allegation, which is a serious one, a crime of genocide is called the crime of crimes, why aren't you bringing it to the International Court of Justice? 70 years is a long enough time for you to make your case. And the other thing, as Justin McCarthy pointed out, why are you keeping your archives closed? If you have a case, you assume that your archives would be evidence you'd want to submit, but you're keeping them closed. So it's really, as pure it is, a political statement. And think also of the rather hypocrisy of Mr. Biden when he says, on the one hand, there's a genocide. On the other hand, Armenia and Turkey ought to get together and work this out. But he's already decided the case before they even get together. He's already said, I'm already into Armenia's side. Why would Armenia surrender something that Biden has already given them? So it's just the typical political mealy-mouthed words that unfortunately continue to have the issue fester rather than be resolved.
Bruce, you've penned several articles on this topic. What is your personal understanding or conclusion of the events of 1915?
First, I think that you cannot really properly apply the elements of genocide that are set forth in the Genocide Convention to actions that occurred prior to the coining of the phrase. Even the term genocide in common lexicon didn't emerge till 1943. It's a universal principle of justice that you don't have ex post facto laws. Making something criminal at the time done was innocent. But even putting aside what I believe is the non-retroactivity nature of the crime of genocide, it seems to me it's virtually impossible to find an intent, which is also difficult to ascribe to an entire country, Turkey, to destroy in whole or in part Armenians because they were Armenians. Let's use the Armenians' own statements at the Paris Peace Conference in 1919, February 26, where they repeatedly said, we were offered autonomy by the Sultan as the war erupted in exchange for being loyal. And we rejected it, and we became fighters and enlisted with the Entente enemies of Turkey. Remember, these are Armenians who are Ottoman citizens. So they basically said, we opted for treason. They described themselves at the Paris Peace Conference as belligerents. They stated at the Paris Peace Conference that Ottoman Turks died in the same proportion as Ottoman Armenians. The war is hell, as our famous General William Tecumseh Sherman said. It wasn't a case like the Jews in the Holocaust. No Nazis died at Auschwitz or Dachau. Here we have both sides suffering horribly in a war. And remember also, there's great similarity, I believe, in what the Armenian Ottomans were doing in seeking to enlist with enemy ranks in order to basically secede from the Ottoman Empire, with our own civil war with the Confederate States of America. We also had, they weren't really a minority in the Congress at the time, but the southern states said, well, we want to secede. Well, they didn't have a right to secede. They fired on Fort Sumter. There was a horrible civil war. Hundreds of thousands died, but no one ever suggested that this was genocide. They were seeking a political goal, independence. We were arguing in the Union side, it wasn't legal. War was fought and the South lost. But if anything, the Southerners were immediately charged with treason. The Union wasn't charged with genocide. The treason charges were largely foregone in order to heal wounds. But the Ottoman Armenians basically were seeking the same secession that our Confederate states were from the Ottomans, simply indirectly by enlisting with the Entente powers as enemy belligerents and believing that after the war concluded they would be given independence. That aspiration was not successful. The Paris Peace Conference didn't award them independence, but that was their goal. So I do not believe, based upon the Armenians' own statements, that there's evidence that the empire, the Ottomans, were intending to destroy Armenians because they are Armenians. The killings were because they were joined with the enemy in a time of war. Their aspiration was political independence. And when the Genocide Convention was drafted, to destroy a group because of political viewpoint was considered as a prohibited category and rejected decisively, which means that for whatever reasons, and I'm not saying that there may not be other violations of law, killings for political purposes like seeking independence are clearly not genocide.
So what are Turkey's options for how to proceed or respond? Any legal options? What can we expect?
Well, I think there's a possibility that Turkey, without waiting for Armenia, could itself approach the International Court of Justice under Article 9 in saying that we are being injured by these false allegations of genocide. We want what the lawyers call a declaratory judgment that there wasn't. Armenia would have their chance to submit their case that it was genocide. Turkey would have its chance to submit the evidence they say is exculpatory. But at least we would have a judicial resolution of the issue and take it out of politics. It's just a fact of life at present. The Armenians are far more skilled and adept at certainly maneuvering within the American political system to get politicians on their side through donations or otherwise. And if you remain in a political atmosphere as opposed to an impartial tribunal, Turkey's chances are very low. Now that can be remedied. I'm working with a group in the United States, the Turkish Anti-Defamation Alliance, to try to establish an education program about what is the law of genocide, what are the Armenian allegations, so that we're able to present a case that's systematic, undercutting the arguments that I think are very, very anemic, suggesting that the Armenians were slaughtered because they were Armenians, and ignoring the fact that they were enemy belligerents seeking political independence, who died in no greater numbers than Ottoman Turks did, among other pieces of evidence. And I say the reason why there ought to be some confidence in going to the court is that the closest tribunal that has ever addressed the issue, the European Court of Human Rights in 2015, stated that there's never been a proven Armenian genocide and that it's a historical issue that does not lend itself to conclusive answers. And that's what I would urge consideration. It's been in the political realm too long. The Genocide Convention specifically contemplated that these kinds of issues of genocide would be resolved by the International Court of Justice, not in the corridors of power where ulterior motives are always at work.
All right, Bruce Fein in Washington, D.C.